Welcome to P English Literature, a YouTube channel that conveys Amazon, Goodread, blog, and video book reviews coupled with interviews with authors. It's a perfect channel for book lovers, authors, and writers generally. P English Literature, the exact channel for you and me. Hi there, viewers. Today I'm joining in conversation with Mrs. Nicole Gillespie, the author of Transparent Moment book of poem. It's really a pleasure to have Mrs. Nicole featured on P English Literature. Hi there, Mrs. Nicole.
Hello, Mr. Peter.
It's really
I appreciate you having me.
it's really a pleasure to have you on the show. It's really a pleasure. I'm glad to speak directly with you. Okay, Okay, Mrs. Nicole, without wasting much time, I'd love to, move straight into the interview. And I would love to ask you, why do you choose to write in poetry compared to other genre of literature? Why do you find, poetry? Why do you love to write in poetry? Because we have different other genre of literature. If there's anything that particularly intrigued you to write in poetry that you would love to share with us.
So why do I like to write in poetry form? It's because it's so intriguing to me, the way the use of words and the rhythm that's in it. I think it just pulls you in more. Like it's so creative. It's not so much of a structured writing, and it shows so much passion in the way that you use words. You can pull your readers into how you're feeling, because it actually can pull you right there. So if I'm reading some poetry and it brings me to the place, so it was more drawn over to poetry than any other genre of literature. It just has a rhythm to it. It kind of got like a music to it to me.
That's very good. Yes, Mrs. Nicole, there is something that I find quite exceptional while reading through your book, Transparent Moment, Book of Poem, and that's the poetic characteristics of it being pathos in nature. And I remember that you wrote in some part in the poem titled Fear specifically that most of the experience you've described in this book that you've experienced it, and you made mention about insomnia and some of your childhood experience while dealing with fear. I don't know if you would love to share with us some of your experience during this time.
I dealt with a lot of fear when growing up. I had a lot of loss in my family, which kind of injected some fear. Not kind of, but it did inject fear inside of me. So I dealt with a lot of fear as a child. I had insomnia that I spoke about in my beginning chapter of fear. And the way that I did overcome fear is, at that time I was dating my husband. Before he became my husband, he took me to church, and our pastor at that time spoke with me about fear, and he set me down and he was telling me about fear has torment. This is how I overcame it. And when he showed me in the word of God about the spirit of fear has torment, it in some strange way it relieved me, because I knew what I was feeling was a bit of torment, because fear would have you fearing. I feared the dark. I feared noises. I just feared a lot of stuff, which compromised my sleep and a lot of things, because I was really afraid of the dark. So when he told me that, it relieved me, and he said you need to be delivered from the spirit of fear. And I can remember the day going to church and standing before the altar, and I just cried out before God, and I said, Lord, I really need to be delivered. And I can remember the day that I had got delivered, and I didn't deal with that heavy of fear at that time anymore. I was totally delivered from the fear of darkness and all of that. Now through the years, I did kind of struggle with, it would just almost try to come back on me, but I was strong enough to combat that because I knew what I was dealing with.
Wow. There's also a segment that I find quite fascinating while reading through Transparent Moment Book of Poem. And that's the part whereby you made mention about the falling apart of the modern day church, how the church of nowadays are calling carnal things spiritual and spiritual things carnal. I know quite well that this is a crucial issue that the body of Christ is dealing with nowadays. And I want to specifically ask you because while I read through this point in your book, I was quite, intrigued by it, despite the fact that it's a poetry book. You made mention of how the church of nowadays are calling carnal things spiritual and spiritual things carnal. And I was going to ask you specifically if you'd love to expound more on this subject.
um, just growing up with my grandmother, she was very spiritual, very deep off into church. And I could just remember every time she was giving us Bible studies, and she said she would tell us it would be a time of the church falling away. It'd be a falling away of the church, and how the church will become just as much as worldly as the world is. And um, just seeing the different transitions now from then, it's just a lot of things that we accept in the church now that we wouldn't even accept in the church then. You know what I'm saying? Like, the spiritual level, it seemed to me as more entertainment, more worship of men than worship of God. You reverence the man of God more than you reverence God. It's just a change. You could tell about the shift that's going on. And the outreaching, the going out for outreaching of the souls and affecting the church is affecting, and you can see the downfall of the world. Because at one time, we was Christians was looked up to, not that we wanted to be, but it was looked up to as something that was holy and righteous. And when people was burdened or have problems, they would run to the church. But now they running from the church, because if we be honest about it, they see the mess that's going on. They see it more than us. They know how to call it, because they can identify with a familiar spirit. So they familiar with what's going on in the church, because the same thing that's going on in the church, in the streets, is the same thing that's going on in the church. So people is not being fooled by that, and it's turning them away to different religions, to worship different things, because how the church is we're kind of fell in the world nowadays about the highways and byways, and walking circumspect before God, and putting God back where he belongs, instead of allowing men to be in place of God.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I find this point, a crucial issue to address nowadays. And we can always see how the church is falling apart, you know, in a very gruesome manner. Very, very gruesome.
Yeah, it kind of lately I've been finding myself writing about the change of the church, me included, because I could feel sometimes that the world be falling on me, or coming into me. So I kind of become burdened by that. I was thinking about the scripture says the love of many shall wax cold, because
Yeah.
the how things are waxing so bad on the earth. So a lot of people that have the love of God in them, their love is waxing cold from being exposed so much to all the violence, and just not just the violence, just the debauchery of God. Just a lot of things is going on. Yeah. So it had been lately, I've been kind of in the mood to just write about the falling away of the church, and how things are changing, and the leadership that's going on in the church.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the answer to that question. Another thing I would love to ask you about Transparent Moment, Book of Poem. While I read it, or in one of my review of it in Amazon, the subtitle, I wrote that it is an autobiographical seeming poetry. Well, I don't know if it actually is, because I wrote that based on my own perception. And I want to particularly ask you, because the book is very vast, it is profound, and it is deep. I want to ask you what ratio of biography of this book to experience or some other things. I want to ask you, is it a total work of what you've personally experienced, or a mixture of some other things?
It's a kind of a book about my life, because it, like I put in the book, it was written down in a span of 2 decades.
Yeah.
So the book wasn't yeah, it was, I just write out emotions. So at that time, if I'm feeling something, I would just write it down. I meant to put the time and dates back in the book because everything I write, I time and date it and seal it. And I should have put it so you could see the time and dates when I was going through. And with my book being, I named it Transparent Moments because it's very transparent. Because
Yeah.
I'm a Christian and I love God from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. But as Christians, we still go through things. So that's what I was showing, that I was going through life. I was going through trials and tribulations. I was going through times when I backslid, but still how God pulled me out. So I wrote about them moments down through the years and I just collected them because it was like a diary to me. It was my private way of a diary. But I always, like I told you, I love to write in poetry form because you could be very so creative with the words. And that's why I wrote it in that style of what's name. So yes, it was like a documentation down through the years, them 2 decades of my life. Yes.
Wow. That
Yeah, that's great. And that also want to lead me to my next question. While I read through this book, in one of the introduction part of the book, you made mention that the book was written over a span of 2 decades, that's 20 years, and which I'm actually, fascinated about. So, I want to specifically ask you, what are the challenges that you experience while putting this book together? And, I'm just curious, how do you go about getting this book together as at this time? And what are the likely challenges that you experience while writing Transparent Moment?
So when I was writing a poetry in my little secrets, I always wanted a poetry book. So it didn't take me that long to take me 20 years to write the book.
wow.
It was just that I always wanted to write a book, and the opportunity came up for me to take the um the stuff that I already had when I allowed people in to read some of my stuff. I would people say, "Oh, you always writing," or something like that, and I'll be like, "Yeah." They said, "What are you writing?" I said, "I kind of write out of emotions. It's kind of therapy for me, and I like writing poems." And they will read it, and they was like, "Oh, this stuff is pretty good." And I'm like, because we could be our worst critics,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was like, "Oh, you think it's pretty good?" They said, "No, Nicole, it's really good. It's amazing. You should do a book."
Wow.
I was like, "A book? Are you sure?" And so that's what made my dream always in the back of my mind come true. So it was easy to take everything that I already had and to put it in book form. Now I have a second book that's
Wow.
coming out. So now I already knew about the process of doing the book and the progression of the book and different things like that, because that came easy because it was already a manuscript done and it was a manuscript to be put together.
That's
When
great.
somebody with my friend, she said, "Well, Nicole, you already got a manuscript. That's what the first book," and we put it together. So the challenge was when I did my second book. That
Wow.
was the challenge. And to write, and I got excited because of the accolades, or people like, oh, was really impressed with the writing and stuff. So it threw me into a mode of writing, but I didn't want to lose the passion and behind the writing. I wanted people to still feel the same emotions and everything as with the first book, which is my baby, as with the second book. So I didn't want to just write something to be writing anything. So the second book is the challenge of putting a book together, writing it in a timely fashion, getting it out. Because I don't want to write a book over 2 or 3 years. That's just me. Because it's just poetry. I could see if I was doing a novel or something like that, I get it. But writing a poetry book, I want it to be done within like 2 or 3 months, if that's
For
possible.
16.
Yeah, that's a very good point to raise. There is also something I find quite, exceptional about your book, Transparent Moment, Book of Paul, and that's the fact that it asks a lot of biblical quote. Well, I know that most of the Psalms of David in the Bible are can be likened to as poetry also, because I remember very well some of the Psalms of David can be likened to as poetry, and your book asks quite a lot of biblical quotes. And I was going to ask you specifically, how do you see this method as a fitting approach for poetry?
I think so far been received, because I think it's a lot of people that's in church that goes through the exact same thing that I've been through.
Yeah.
And when they read it, they be like, it's so relatable because I'm being transparent about what I've been through, and or my struggles I had as a single saved woman, from going from being married to being single, about times of loneliness or fault, just being real transparent in the poetry. So I think that's why a lot of people was kind of receptive to it, because it's being very open and very. I actually have a lot of people that inbox me, Christian women that inbox me and say, Nicole, I've been through the same thing, and I'm so happy that you or being a voice and being very transparent. It's a vulnerable situation that you put yourself in. So that's why I love the scripture said you set free through your testimony.
Yeah.
And my testimony is setting me free,
Yes.
because a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people be stuck because they got this struggle, but they scared because they want to look as being righteous or anything. But the race is not given to the swift or to the strong. It's
Yeah.
about endurance. It's about staying on track with still having a love for God. And when God showed me that, I was able to say, I can share this, I can be open, because it's a lot of people that goes through being saved as long as I've been saved, and loving God as long as I've been loving God. I didn't went through the natural things in life. So they inbox me and say, oh, I've been through this. Thank you for talking about it. Or,
Yeah.
I can relate so deeply to it. So I think that's why the poetry book is being receptive, because it's a transparent book conversation, real thing that I put out there, and a lot of people is like, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. That.
Yes, yes, I really agree with that point because I can also remember that sometimes the poetry is one of those, like I said earlier on, it's a language of the soul. And sometimes when, our readers get to read it, they find it speaking to themselves in particular. And that also resonates with you. And that also made me remember some of the reviews I had some times ago on my book, Fate in the Dungeon of Doom, where the person said that, she found herself resonating. The book left her resonating and reminiscent about the step that she has taken throughout her own life. And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe that it's true. So that's one of the characteristics that I think poetry have over other form of other genre of literature because it is relatable. It is something that if one person writes, another person can find it like similar to his or her life. Because I've actually received a lot of response like, oh, people telling me that wow, your poem made me remember some of the things I passed through, and I was like, wow, I couldn't believe such.
Yes, so with that being said, that's why I love this book. It is so relatable to my soul. It
Wow.
is a cry in this book that is so raw and real. It just pulls me in. And I said, oh, this guy is my kindred spirit. And I'm not just saying that to pump you up. Honestly, God knows it blesses my soul because you're being real in the book. You talk about the cries and the fears and all of that. And it blesses me. It truly blesses me. And I love this book. I look, because I can relate to it deeply. I can.
Thank you. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to know that you love Fate to the Dungeon of Doom. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Nicole. I was also going to ask you about the progress of your next publication. I think I read something about that in your book, and I was specifically going to ask you, if you can share with us the progress of your next publication. If
Actually, I'm done with the whole manuscript. I mean, blow from the introduction to the chapters and everything. Now it's the structure of the book and putting it in book form. That's where the challenges for me come in at, because I'm I just want to just write. I just want to just write and be creative. But I learned that when you start being an author and writing books and different things, you have to learn the structure part of it, and that's where my struggle of coming in is getting form, book cover, and different things like that. But actually, the book is completed. It's totally completed, and I'm learning a lot. And it's a journey. It's a journey of ups and downs. It's a lot, but it's exciting at the same time because it's very freeing, and I thank God for that.
wow, wow, I love the answer to that question. It was very nice. I was also going to ask you, Mrs. Nicole, about your book. because I know that publishing as an independent published author can sometimes be very demanding and very difficult. And most independent published authors do not even know how to go about publishing or marketing their books. And I there's something that I always say, that most bad books sell better than some good books because of good marketing. There are a lot of books out there that have good exposure and they're not even up to date. When I'm saying up to date, I mean they're not really literally fine or good or perfect, but they're able to make out their ways and have good sales because of the intensity of the marketing. So I was going to ask you specifically why there are also some books that are very good that are published by independent published author, but they languish in silence. People do not know them. They die in lack of awareness because of bad marketing. And I was going to ask you specifically, what is your experience like as an independent published author when it comes to the medium you've utilized so far in terms of marketing your book?
Learning, I'm learning about marketing, and that's the next struggle. Like after you get the book out there, you have to sell yourself. You have to learn how to sell yourself, and that's a lot because I love my shell, my bubble that I be in. But to get it out there and to be known or taken serious as a serious writer or a poet, you have to sell yourself. You have to promote. Like I use Facebook now. I use Instagram, and I use P English literature as a form of promotion. Um, it's not easy at all. You got to come out your mind. You got to come out your mind to even begin to selling, because if you're in a hole or in your mind, um it's just gonna sit there. Like you just said, it could be some books that's not so favorable and they sell because the promotion is off the chain. They know how to promote, they know how to outsource, they know how to get that out. So I'm learning how to do do promotions of my book, or even getting out in the community selling the books. Like if they have like a book fair or different things like that, I'm learning how to promote and stop being so have to step out on water and trust God for the process. But God been pretty good during this process. He gently guided me. It's a slow thing, but God is really saying, okay, Nicole, here, take another step. You can do it. It's okay. You can do it. They like you. They like you.
Yeah, that was a good response to that. Thank you. I was also going to ask you, what sort of advice do you have for poets who are yet to get their book out, like yourself? What sort of advice do you have for poets who are still struggling with publishing a book? If there's any advice you would love to share with people in this category.
Just you have to be vulnerable. It is okay. It's okay to have a bit of fear, because it keeps you humble. You have to just be you, stand on who you are, do not change up at all. I tell people I'm a nature lover. I'm not going to present myself no other way than who I am. If you, I didn't have people look at me and say, oh, you just basic. I'm basic. I love it. I love to be simple. Just be you, be okay to be vulnerable. Don't change your words up. Listen to advice and listen to healthy criticism. It's a good thing. But
Yeah.
ultimately, just be yourself, step out there and just do it. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
With fear and all, just step out there and do it, because you ain't gonna never know if you're gonna be a success. Even if you don't be a success, you can ultimately say, I did this, I accomplished this, and I'm an author. I can literally say, I'm an author.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's big to me. Yes, I'm a published author, and that's big to me. That's a big accomplishment and a dream that I always have, and it'll make you feel good on the inside. So with any young poets or author poets or just writers of novels and different things, just do it.
Just do it.
Don't go with your fear, and just still do it, because you know that you got a voice just as much as anybody else, and you got something to say just as much as anybody else.
That's great. That's
Yes, yes, and that's one of the you know words that I do say, that just do it, just go ahead and do it. Even if there is no support at the first instance, there will definitely be an open door. That's one of the things I've always experienced, and advice, impending authors, just go ahead and get your book out there. Don't, don't allow anything to stop you, or you're thinking about how will I go about it, who will buy it, etc. You just do it. There will definitely be an open door.
When dealing with a lot of fear, because I dealt with a lot of loss in my family and different things that would just play on my mind. And one day I just sat down and I wrote about the poem Fear. It's called Fear in Both. Sometimes I find myself burying myself within myself, like a child, hiding not only his head, but his whole body deep underneath covers, running from whatever is out there, unknown in the dark, panicking as if it's no hope for tomorrow. At times, I feel as if it's unfair I was ever born into this condition we call life. How guilty I feel for birthing even my children into this damn world because I was too scared to walk in it alone, into this transparent darkness. How selfish of me. Oh, why have I subjected my children to this chaotic way of existing? My soul has found no contentment. It is so restless. I struggle between the normalities of the flesh versus the normalities of the spirit. Yes, at times, more than not, I want to live in this world with no limits. But I find soothing boundaries blocking my need to fit in into this lackluster world. It's almost like hope I cannot touch.
Wow.
That's why I beat my flesh into submission, just for even a glimpse of this hope. Yet, this is where the fear come into play. It is like I'm torn down the middle. Both are rewarding in their own ways, but one has such a great advantage, but one has such a great disadvantage to my eternity, which I moan desperately for.
Wow.
Like a wounded animal, it's my eternity.
Wow.
Yes, this life is the one I'm familiar with: flesh, earth, fire, sun, moon, stars, cold, hot, taste, touch, smell, hear, and sight, life and death, happy and sad. Am I at fault for this?
Am I at fault for that? I honestly cannot answer that question. And that's one of the parts where I find your poem very deep and philosophical. They are extremely profound. I remember while reading through it, I understand some lines there in Fearing Boat. Yeah, just like the way it plays where you made mention about sometimes I find myself burying myself within myself, and the part where you wrote about at times I feel as if it is unfair that I was ever born. And I move on to another part where you said it is almost like hope I cannot touch. And I was like, wow, these poems are very, very deep, very, very profound. And that's one of the reasons why I want to urge anyone who is yet to get a copy of Transparent Moment Book of Poem to do that. I left a link in the description part of this video if you would like to get a copy on Amazon. The book is extremely fantastic. It is beyond my description. It is powerful. It is powerfully written. And when I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, these poems are, you know, they are profound. They are beyond my understanding. They are just too deep. They are extremely deep.
Oh,
That's
thank
a
you so
fantastic
much.
book. I love it.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Nicole, for the recitation and for you accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature.
I appreciate you so much, Mr. Peter, and thank you for the invite and thank you for having me. I was a little nervous today, but I appreciate it. I enjoyed this interview.